Welcome to episode 243 of Angela Watson's Truth for Teachers. I'm your host, Angela Watson, and I'm here to speak life, encouragement, and truth into the minds and hearts of educators and get you energized for the week ahead. Today, I'm talking with Marissa Minnick about how to reclaim your weeknights by balancing the task triangle. Visit truthforteachers.com to see the short, shareable blog post version of this article. With everything you're juggling right now, free lessons and resources can be a big help and time saver. Check out Every Teacher Every Day. It's a website that provides not only lesson resources, but a virtual teacher's lounge with a diverse community of wise and witty educators to collaborate with. Every Teacher Every Day also does tons of giveaways and connects educators with companies that provide free teacher perks. It's a practical site with lots of heart and humor, and everything is totally free. Join the community now by going to everyteachereveryday.org/truthforteachers. That's everyteachereveryday.org/truthforteachers. If your coworkers are burning out and overwhelmed and your administrators feel helpless to do anything about it, your school's not alone. Let your administrators know about the 40-hour leadership program. It's a new offshoot of my 40-hour teacher workweek course that is designed to create change at the school level, helping everyone in the building to stay focused on what really makes a difference for kids and streamline or eliminate the rest. 40-hour leadership can be joined at any time. It's an entirely self-paced online program for admins, and it only requires an upfront time investment of around 8 to 10 hours to completely reimagine systems and simplify processes that will save everyone in your school building time and energy every single day. Go to 40htw.com to learn more about the 40-hour leadership program, the 40-hour instructional coaching program, and our 6-week fast track program for teachers, which we've recently opened to new members. So it's 40htw.com to learn more. Have you ever wondered what other career options might be possible for you? Daphne Williams of the Teacher Career Coach has lots of resources to help you translate your classroom work experience into skills that are highly sought after in the corporate world. Her course includes resume templates and guidance, contact information for companies that frequently hire former teachers, and all the support and community you need to find your next career or just build a side hustle until you're ready to leave the classroom. If you're curious about your options or on the fence about leaving, start with her free quiz to help you identify other careers that might be a good fit. Just go to teachercareercoach.com/truthforteachers or click the link in the show notes. You'll find special free resources Daphne designed just for Truth for Teachers listeners. That's teachercareercoach.com/truthforteachers. So if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, you might remember episode 182, in which I interviewed Katrina Onstadt. She is the author of a book called The Weekend Effect: The Life-Changing Benefits of Taking Time Off and Challenging the Cult of Overwork. And one of the most fascinating things that I learned from her book was about the emergence of unions and workers' rights movements in the late 1800s, in which factory employees were often putting in 18-hour days, 6 days a week. And their rallying cry and their protest was 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, and 8 hours for what we will. And this is where the 40-hour work week was originally developed, this concept of working 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So check out episode 182 if you want to hear more about that, about the history of the weekend, the history of our time off and leisure in our society. It's a really fascinating story. But also keep in mind that that rallying cry is super relevant to what you're going to hear in the conversation with my guest today. Imagine if in your life you had 8 hours a day for work, 8 for rest, and 8 hours for the other things that you want to do. Because that is the technical reality, if not the actuality for many educators. You're contracted to work 8 hours each weekday, and you hopefully spend around 8 hours each day sleeping or laying down or resting. And that leaves in our 24-hour cycle 8 hours for everything else. Even when you factor in commuting, getting dressed, household chores, caregiving, all those kinds of things, those, quote, 8 hours a day for what we will Well, that's a substantial amount of time. And the right for you to have that time were hard won. Folks during the Industrial Revolution literally gave their lives for us to have better working conditions. They gave their lives for us to have unions and a 40-hour work week. And the value of the free time that their protests gave us is substantial. So what happens when you have those 8 hours a day, when you're not contracted to work and you're not sleeping? How can you make the most of that time so it doesn't fly by with mundane tasks and other obligations? Well, enter Marissa Minnick. She is a middle school science teacher in Durham, North Carolina, and she is also currently a graduate student in a school administration program. We need admins like Marissa. I am so excited that she's doing that. Marissa is super passionate about creating sustainable workplace practices and talking about the role of mindfulness in teaching. She's also part of the Truth for Teachers Collective, which is our new community of educator authors who are sharing their honest experiences and advice about teaching on the Truth for Teachers blog. Marissa recently published an article called Reclaim Your Weeknights by Balancing the Task Triangle, and I invited her here on the podcast to talk about it. Thanks so much for being here with us, Marissa.
Thank you for having me, Angela.
So we're talking about reclaiming our weeknights. And many of us fall into the trap of believing that we need an extended period of time in order to truly relax or immerse ourselves in tasks or projects that aren't related to work. So we think about weekends, holidays, and of course, summer break as the time when we can rest and do all of these other things. But your argument is that we shouldn't overlook the value of our weeknights. Can you say more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So first and foremost, I love a good extended break. I think everyone will count down to those breaks in their calendar. It's different than a weeknight, and there's definitely no getting around that. They offer something that a weeknight can't, as much as I advocate for them. But even, at the most kind of simple level here, there are more weeknights in our calendar than there are these extended breaks. Every week, in an average week, you have 5 weeknights in your schedule, and then we have just 2 days on the weekend. So, even just numerically, we should really look at this time as something that is an asset to our schedule and to be strategic about and intentional about. And so we can't always just push ourselves to this next extended break all the time. That just feeds burnout and makes this process where these breaks that we've counted down to are these only chances that we have to catch up on rest, run errands, do home projects, which is just draining in itself. So yeah, in my mind, weeknights are a big answer to that question. Certainly not the only answer, but something that we need to capitalize on a little bit more. And this really kind of clicked for me. My first year teaching, my husband and I bought a house, and we decided to renovate it during testing season of both of us are teachers actually, so our first year.
Ah.
And it was a lot. But all of a sudden we would go home and change and eat a snack real fast. And meanwhile, there's drywall coming down and the ceiling, we're scraping it off. And we left our house every day to go back to our apartment at the time. Just so happy and content. And we were wow, this time has always been here. And we used to just come home, maybe push through making a grilled cheese, sandwich that first year teaching, and just collapse with Netflix and then do it again the next day. And there's a time and place for that, for sure. But I felt this different type of energy when I was connecting with the weeknight in a way that I don't if I go into that, whole dinner, shower, Netflix routine, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. So yeah, that's kind of the main idea about how I feel about weeknights and my connection, that kind of entry point with being kind of forced into tackling a home renovation in the time that I had. But it really clicked for me. And now that we're done with that process, is something that I continue to try to think strategically about and don't just let it slip by.
And you're right, it requires intentionality, because the just crash on the couch with Netflix is the easiest form of relaxation that we can think of. It requires a lot more energy to say, let's go for a hike instead, or let's actually do something this weekend. That's one of the traps that I always fall into too. It's I want to do things, but then I actually don't want to get off the couch and do them. But it's not nearly as satisfying a kind of relaxation as it is when you're actually making time for the things that you enjoy. So this idea of really reclaiming those weeknights and making it, purposefully something that is rejuvenating, I think is really exciting. So when taking inventory of our various commitments and responsibilities, you suggest that it may help to think about a task triangle. How does that work?
Yeah, so it's totally unreasonable to think that every day after work you're going to engage in, going on a hike or meeting a friend for coffee. Like, I know that I cannot do that every day, and it might
Right.
be feasible for someone else's schedule. Um, but like, we all have things that we have to do, and things that even though we might not always enjoy it when we're doing it, we want to do it. So I suggest this idea of like a task triangle where there's like three different sides, and over the course of a week or over the course of 2 weeks, you want that triangle to be balanced. I've found that it helps me feel my best when I have a balanced set of activities in the week. And what I suggest is the sides or corners, however you want to think of it, of this task triangle are commitments that you have to your like immediate self, things that give you pleasure in the moment. You can kind of think of it as like these things I want to blank. I want to go to a yoga class. I want to go for a run. I want to spend time in my garden. And then there's also things that you don't want to do. You will never finish a sentence, I want to clean the toilet. But there are things that your future self will benefit from. So like my future self always thanks me if I do some meal prep on a Sunday, or gosh, it thanks me when I get 8 hours of sleep. So these things that aren't always appealing in the moment, but you need them to balance yourself and to come to work rejuvenated, to be there for your family, to like show up for yourselves and others. And then the third kind of corner of the task triangle is your sense of self. And this is like, you can think of it with the fill in the blank sentence, I want to be someone who blank. So for me, I want to be someone who participates in neighborhood cleanups. I want to be someone who's involved in the neighborhood association. And these often are like larger commitments, maybe being there for a family member who's sick, taking time out of your schedule to bake food for a neighbor who just had a baby. But it's important to who you want to be in relationship to your own self and to others in your community. So, yeah, the triangle, not every weeknight is going to be, rainbows and butterflies. Sometimes you're going to do some your chores, you're going to do some other commitments, PTO, whatever you're involved in. But over the course of the week, trying to have a mix of activities that speak to each of those different sections is really important.
Yeah, that kind of variety to make sure that you're not getting balance necessarily every day, but thinking about it on like a weekly or an every other week basis. It's really good. And I know you have 4 tips for helping to balance the time triangle. So let's talk about each one of those.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just kind of say the tips first. That's how I process things the best. Um,
Sure.
Looking at the clock is the first one. The second one is talking it out. The third one, I kind of cheated there. It's a repeat, talking it out again with a different kind of lens. And then the last one is just get going. So to start with looking at the clock, because that sounds really counterintuitive. But this is a strategy for when I'm feeling tired or burnt out. It might be in the middle of the day, sometimes like just after dropping off my class for lunch. It could be the end of the day when I'm locking the door and heading home for the evening. But what I've noticed is that we absolutely value the same time on the clock differently at different points in the week. So my 2 o'clock p.m. on a Saturday, I look at the clock and I think I have so much time left. I have time for an afternoon walk. I can get in the garden. I can make a nice dinner. I can hang out on the porch with my family. But 2 o'clock in the middle of a school day, I'm probably like, getting the kids ready for dismissal, maybe depending on where I'm at, where I'm working, finishing up my last class. Then I have a staff meeting, and then I'm going to go home and repeat it the next day. So like the same time carries an immensely different value in those two situations, partially as it should. But if you just pause for a minute and challenge that and ask yourself, how would I feel if this was, 3:30 on a Friday? Probably really excited. So like, why can't we kind of harness some of that excitement, even though it's different, and apply it to a Monday afternoon? It just really helps shake things up.
Yeah, that's a great tip.
The second tip was talking it out, and this involves just if you live by yourself, then you can still engage in this tip. It'll be more of an internal kind of like dialogue with yourself rather than with others. But this is just when you get together with your family, who you live with, and you say, okay, like what would our ideal after work weeknight look like? What does everyone need from this time? Like, how can you create these little pockets of pleasure to recharge? And it's a time to get everyone on the same page with that. So like, what would this look like for all of us? And kind of in that conversation, it's helpful to think about activities you can enjoy maybe as a family. Everyone is going to benefit in some way, as well as those activities you need personally, just one-on-one time to reset and do what you need to do for yourself. So it just involves discussing that. You're not going to put into action what you don't plan for. You were talking earlier about how it's hard to, like, I want to do something this weekend, but wanting to do something on the weekend often involves planning it early.
That's right.
Making reservations, getting tickets, things like that. And the
Yep.
weeknight's the same way, mostly in regards to like meal prep. I feel like if I know that I'm going to do a more strenuous activity on a weeknight, you can bet I'm going to put a really fast dinner on the calendar for that night, just to make it work, to reduce those like excuses. So yeah, talk with your family about it so you can actually, take this from an idea in your head to a part of your life. And then the repeat tip, talk it out again. The first part of that is a really pleasurable conversation. What do we want to do? What are our hopes and what are our goals? But a big part of that conversation is balancing out, thinking about the task triangle, talking about those things that you need to do for your future self. So, okay, like we as a family, we want to go to the gardens and have a picnic this night, or we want to go to this movie on a school night. We want to do these things. Okay, but how are we going to balance that with our responsibilities to our family? So it involves maybe dividing up work in your family. My husband and I are really intentional about the way that we divide work and the way that we shift work when one of us has like a busier season of life or something. So talking about the work, talking about that future self portion of the task triangle, to have everyone in your family benefit from understanding, one, like what does it take to keep our family running? And then two, how do we reconcile this with the fact that we all need to recharge as well?
Oh, that's so good. I love it. So you're talking it out, and then you're also talking it out again through that different lens.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Could consolidate those into two different or one tip, but those conversations have a really different feel. You have to be, intentional about the way you approach different family members about rethinking your schedule, especially if you've had the same division of household labor or chores for a while.
Right. And it also sounds like it's an ongoing conversation too. This isn't something you just decide together once and then you're good. This is something you're always sort of like reevaluating. How are we using our time? What do we want to be using our time for?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. My family's in a shift right now. I'm a grad school student right now, and our schedule's getting ready to change with the new semester. And so my
Mhm.
husband and I just need to check in.
Yeah.
Are you still liking doing this? Yeah, great. Okay. I'll continue to take on these tasks. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the last tip is probably the cliche kind of statement, we just need to get going. But why I think that's particularly important in this lens is that we all have this routine that we've made after work and on the weeknight. And if you're listening to this podcast, or if you're, thinking about this topic, chances are you're not 100% satisfied with the way that your weeknight is going. So you might want to change this, but you have this muscle memory in your brain of what you do after work. It's this automatic kind of, routine you've developed and you enact on autopilot from the minute your car like pulls in the driveway. So this fourth tip is you just need to get going and veer off of this path and turn off that autopilot, turn on and dial up your intentional commitments and questions you're asking your family, and tasks that you put on the horizon as a possibility for that night. Kind of switch all of that up and just do one of them. Because once your brain has and your body has experienced switching up your weeknight, and if it was a really positive, pleasurable experience, it's going to remember that, and it's going to make it easier and easier to commit to that in other nights. You just really, the hardest step is like the first one. And then once you've had that pleasurable experience, you'll be like, okay, like, yes, it was a little bit of extra work to um, prep. If you're doing meal prep, I try to not eat out that much. So that's like where my brain always goes for me. All these things are very tied to like, what does our dinner look like? So like in the morning, like maybe you're going to start marinating something for dinner ahead of time. That way, you know that you can get going. As soon as your car pulls in the drive after school, you're putting on your sneakers, you're checking out that trail in the neighborhood that you've been wanting to explore. So yeah, just allowing yourself to switch it up and accept that you might love it. You also might not like it. So just think about it as trying something out. I think you wrote about that, Angela, in the Fewer Things Better book. You're not committing to this playbook. You're
Right.
trying something once, seeing if it feels good and seeing if you want to repeat it.
Yep, it's all just a giant experiment. That's how I think about productivity and time management. It's some things are going to work for a while and then stop working. They, may not work ever at all. Or maybe you try something now and it doesn't work, and then you revisit in a different season of life and it does. So I think these are really great tips to just sort of be playful with it. Can you summarize for us the three elements of the task triangle again?
Yeah, of course. So it was commitments to your immediate self. Those are the things that you want to do. Your future self, the things that your future self will thank you for. And then your sense of self, which is like, I want to be someone who does this. That's like your core values and what you really resonate with.
When you think about the task triangle for yourself, is this something that you write down the answers to, or are you just sort of mentally reflecting on?
That's a great question. I am increasingly more and more into like journaling. And the more out of balance I feel, the more I find myself needing to put it on paper to try to work through that and get answers about why I feel that way. I do think it depends for each person, but if your entry point to that is visually looking at it, that can be so helpful just to see, wow, I'm really neglecting. I think most people will find I'm neglecting my immediate self because of
Hmm.
the way that we value our commitments to others far more than we really value what we owe ourselves. So yeah, I think putting on paper is a great plan. Definitely one that I need to remind myself I benefit from because it's not always natural to be like, I'm thinking through all this in my brain. Let me pause and put it on paper. But there's a huge power to that.
What would you say to someone who's thinking, this sounds really cool, but I don't actually know what would be in my task triangle? I actually don't know like what my values are. I actually don't know who it is that I want to be or what's important to me. I've never really had the time to think about it. I'm just constantly putting out fires, attending to other people's needs, caregiving. I've never really thought about those kinds of things. What kind of advice would you give to a person who feels like that?
First, I tell them that's totally natural. I'm at a stage in my life where I'm just constantly learning a lot more about myself, and I love reading like nonfiction books. That's the way that I kind of
Me
interact with
too.
new ideas. Yeah, and like challenge myself to think about things differently. So, one that's totally natural. I think a lot of people have built their own identity based on the way it relates with other people and the way that they think other people will view them positively for choosing a certain choice. So, you know, accept that that's the way it is and then be playful with it like you said earlier. So one of the best kind of mindset shifts that I've encountered and I and still challenging myself to like interact with is kind of just challenging the word should and must. Like you feel like you
Yes.
should, yeah, you should do this, you should do this, okay, like, but who said that, and sometimes I just have to pause now and like listen. I'm going to sound corny. I'm at such an interesting place where I love these sort of mindfulness strategies. And I also love reading about the way it interacts with like, the chemistry of your brain, the different parts of your brain. But asking yourself, like, what do I actually want to do right now? And being quiet and pausing in that moment because sometimes what I want to do like surprises me and it's something that like I've told myself, oh, like I shouldn't do that. There's a more productive task or like why would I want to just sit on the porch and listen to a podcast and close my eyes like when I could be weeding the garden, when I could be cleaning something, but if that's what I want to do and if I've set up my week where I have time for it at that place, like why wouldn't I? So that I to that person just to encourage them to try to build up that experience of listening to your heart and your mind and what you want to do, testing it out and just being willing to accept the answers that come up. You also don't have to commit to it for more than an hour. Sometimes I feel like if I'm going to engage in a task, there's a minimum amount of time I should be doing it for it to be worth it. And that's not true. Like if going for a run is just a 10-minute thing for you, do it. That's fine.
Yes, that's so important. There's just no block of time that is too short to be valuable. And I find myself doing sort of like micro tasks. Like I love to be outside doing stuff in the garden. And I've kind of moved away from this idea that I need to clear like a whole Saturday morning for that.
Hmm.
Sometimes I just wander out there and I just, like, oh, here's a weed growing. Just pull up like a couple weeds and walk around, admire something, walk back in and go back out later in the day, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. It doesn't have to be these long, uninterrupted times to do the things that are really, just recharging for our souls. And I think really that's the premise of everything that we've talked about today. What's something that you wish every teacher understood about reclaiming their weeknights?
I really deeply believe that reclaiming the weeknight is just important to your health, both your mental health, which I think the argument is a lot clearer, but also like your physical health, because I'm someone who, if I'm like anxious, nervous about something, I feel it in my stomach. Like I get sick, I get acne, all these things start going on because of something that was just happening like in the chemistry of my brain. And so this is not just as trivial as like, oh, maybe I could meet that mom for coffee in the playground while our kids play. We can have some me time chatting together. This is about making sure your body and your life is like in balance, is in alignment with what you want to do. So I just think that's an important lens. Like this is related to your health. It's not indulgent. We talk about, I know I hear the phrase self-care a lot, and things that shouldn't be considered indulgent. Like this is just what you need to do for yourself. This is how you take care of yourself as a human in the same way you would take care of a plant or a baby or a relative. So out of all the tips then that we've talked about today, I think that get going tip is the most important. Just like give this a try. There's always going to be something competing for your attention, and that's where the task triangle comes into play. So if you need to do something one day, you need to do it, but then how can you adjust your schedule to account for that later in the week? Just give it a try, and I know that like it'll feel good.
Yes, it will. Thank you, Marissa. This has been so helpful.
Yeah, thank you so much, Angela.